Ava Monroe had been awake for so long that the hospital lights no longer looked white. They had begun to feel like a dull, buzzing haze pressing into her skull. St. Mary's emergency department was chaos that night, the kind of night where the air smelled like antiseptic, burnt coffee, and exhaustion. Nurses rushed past her, stretchers squeaked across the floor, and someone in triage was arguing loudly with a security guard. Ava blinked hard, rubbing the fatigue out of her eyes as she tried to finish charting one last patient before she collapsed. Dr. Monroe, the charge nurse, called out, holding a patient folder in the air. Cubicle 12. Deep laceration. Work accident. Ava forced a smile she didn't feel. On it, her legs were heavy, unsteady, the way they got after too many hours without real food or rest. She pushed aside the curtain, mentally preparing for anything, just not what she saw. Sitting calmly on the exam bed was a man in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, rugged, the type who looked like he'd lived his whole life lifting engines and steel beams. His left arm was wrapped tightly in a makeshift bandage, blood seeping through the cloth, yet he didn't even flinch. He watched her enter, eyes following her with an intensity she felt before she even met his gaze. "You must be the doctor," he said, his voice smooth, almost too relaxed for someone bleeding that much. "Name's Henry Turner." Ava nodded, slipping gloves over trembling hands. "I'm Dr. Ava Monroe." She reached toward the wound, carefully unwrapping the cloth. "What happened?" Drive shaft slipped. He shrugged, as if such an injury was nothing more than a paper cut. "Comes with the job." "Mechanic?" she asked, focusing on the deep, jagged gash running along his forearm. "Owner." "Actually," he replied. "Turner and Son Auto Repair. South end of town. Maybe you've seen the sign." His tone held a kind of pride, but also something else, something she couldn't place. Ava nodded politely, stitching tools in hand, but his next question made her pause. "So," he said casually, "you're engaged to my boy?" Ava looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, what?" "Caleb Turner," he continued, grinning. "Tall kid. Architect. Always dressed too nice for his own good." He smirked. "You show me a picture of you. Guess it really is a small world." Ava let out a nervous laugh. "I didn't know you were his dad. We've never met." "Not officially, anyway," Henry murmured. There was again that stare, unblinking, assessing, almost intrusive. Ava turned her attention back to the wound, intentionally grounding herself in something clinical. "You're going to need stitches. Probably 10, maybe more. Whatever you say, Doc." Henry smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't quite match the warmth of his voice. "And call me Henry. No need for formalities. We'll be family soon." Ava's stomach tightened, though she kept her expression polite. The way he said that, "we'll be family," felt too intimate, too familiar. She chalked it up to lack of sleep and kept working. Henry continued talking, as if attempting to fill the silence. He asked about her residency, her long shifts, where she grew up, even what food she liked. None of the questions were inappropriate, but the way he watched her, like he was memorizing her face, made her skin crawl. She forced casual conversation in return. "Caleb told me you own the shop with him. Raised that boy in a garage," Henry chuckled. "Taught him everything, but he wanted to build skyscrapers instead of fixing engines." His eyes darkened slightly, a shadow passing over them. "Guess we all end up where we're meant to be." "Hold still," Ava said softly as she placed another stitch. She could feel his eyes on her even when she wasn't looking. That intensity, that fixed interest, it unsettled her in a way she didn't want to admit. When she finally finished and wrapped his arm, Henry stood up and flexed it experimentally. "You're good at what you do," he said. "Caleb's lucky to have you." "Thank you," she replied, reaching for the chart. "Make sure to keep it clean. Come back if it swells or bleeds again." "Oh, don't worry," Henry said, gathering his jacket. "I take care of things that matter." The way he said it made the tiny hairs on Ava's arms rise. She watched him walk out of the ED, his silhouette disappearing past the automatic doors. For a second, she had the strangest feeling, like she had just stepped into something she couldn't get out of. A text came in from Caleb right then. "Miss you. See you tomorrow night." "Can't wait." Ava stared at the screen, trying to shake off the lingering discomfort. Caleb was warm, gentle, loving. Nothing like the energy his father gave off. She convinced herself she was just overtired, just imagining things, just paranoid from the exhaustion. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "That man looked at you like he already knew you, like he'd been waiting for you." And Ava Monroe, though she didn't know it yet, had just stepped into the very center of a nightmare that was about to consume her entire life. Ava Monroe stood on the front porch of the Turner home with a suitcase in one hand and a garment bag slung over her shoulder. Caleb had insisted she move in while her apartment was being renovated. "Just for a few weeks, babe. It's pointless to sleep next to drilling and drywall dust." And he was right. But even as she stood there, listening to the hum of sprinklers and the soft rustling of maple leaves, she felt a strange weight settle in her stomach. The door swung open before she could knock twice. "Ava," Henry Turner beamed, stepping forward as though welcoming an old friend. "Let me help you with that." He reached for her suitcase before she could protest, easily lifting it as if it weighed nothing. His presence filled the doorway. Broad shoulders, heavy boots, that familiar workman's scent of oil and metal lingering on his clothes. "Welcome to our home," he said warmly. "Hope you like it here." Ava mustered a polite smile. "Thank you, Henry." He held her gaze one beat too long before stepping aside. Ava walked in, and the moment she crossed the threshold, she understood what Caleb meant when he described the house. It wasn't simply well kept, it felt preserved, like a time capsule. The entryway had framed photos of a woman Ava recognized from Caleb's phone, their late mother, Ellen Turner. Her smile was bright in every picture, her presence so strong in the home that Ava instinctively lowered her voice out of respect. Caleb hurried down the stairs, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You made it." He kissed her forehead gently and took the garment bag from her. "Come on, I'll show you your room." Ava glanced back and saw Henry still watching her, a faint smile on his face. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes, something she wished she could ignore. The second floor split into two wings. Caleb pointed toward the right hallway. "Dad's room is down there. Mine's to the left. We'll set you up in the guest room next to mine." The layout made sense. Plenty of space, enough distance for privacy. But as they walked, Ava noticed the quiet. Too quiet, like the house was holding its breath. When Caleb opened the door to the guest room, sunlight poured in through large windows, illuminating a neatly made queen-sized bed and crisp white curtains swaying gently in the breeze from the vent. "This is perfect," Ava said honestly. "I knew you'd like it." Caleb smiled, brushing his thumb lightly over her cheek. For a moment, everything felt normal. Safe, even. That illusion lasted less than 10 seconds, because from the hallway behind them came a voice, deep, amused, lingering. "Nice room, isn't it?" Ava turned. Henry stood there with one hand braced casually against the doorframe. "We fixed it up last year. Ellen always wanted guests to feel comfortable." Caleb nodded. "Yeah, Mom was—" "We don't need to dig up the past right now," Henry interrupted lightly, though his eyes weren't on Caleb. They were on Ava. Ava offered a polite nod before Caleb gently steered his father away. "We'll be down in a minute. Let Ava settle in." "Take your time," Henry said, that same slow smile crossing his face before he finally walked off. When he was gone, Ava released a breath she didn't know she was holding. Caleb didn't seem to notice. Later that evening, after unpacking and helping Caleb with dinner, Ava excused herself early. She blamed it on her long shift, but the truth was she felt drained in a way she couldn't explain, emotionally more than physically. She walked upstairs, rubbing her temple, ready to collapse into bed. Halfway down the hallway, a sound caught her attention. Something like rustling, soft, rhythmic. It came from Henry's room. She told herself it wasn't her business and kept walking. But even as she reached her door, she felt a presence. Ava turned her head just slightly and saw Henry standing in his doorway, leaning on the frame, watching her. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just studied her. Ava swallowed hard and entered her room. When she quietly turned the lock, she thought she heard the faintest hint of a chuckle. She slept poorly that night, tossing and turning. The next morning, she woke with a dull ache behind her eyes. Caleb sat on the edge of her bed, lacing up his shoes. "You were out cold," he said gently. "Did you take the melatonin?" "Yeah," she whispered, even though she knew she hadn't. Something else had knocked her out. Exhaustion, stress, she wasn't sure. Caleb kissed her forehead. "I have to catch an early flight. One night only. I'll be back tomorrow." She walked him downstairs, hugged him a little longer than usual. When he drove off, she remained at the door, watching until his car disappeared. "Rough night?" a voice said from behind her. Henry was in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, coffee mug in hand. Ava startled. "Oh, good morning. You didn't sleep well?" He said it like a statement, not a question. She forced a thin smile. "First night in a new place. It takes some getting used to." Henry stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. "If you need anything at all, you let me know." Ava nodded politely and escaped upstairs. But as she climbed the steps, she had that unnerving feeling again, like someone was watching her, measuring her, waiting for the right moment. She told herself she was imagining things, that she was exhausted, that Henry was just an awkward man trying to be friendly. But deep inside, a quiet, instinctive fear had begun to grow. And in that house, especially on the second floor, fear had every reason to take root. Ava Monroe woke the next morning with a heaviness in her body that didn't feel like normal exhaustion. She blinked up at the ceiling, realizing her sheets were damp with sweat. Her head throbbed in slow, pulsing waves, and every joint in her body ached as if she'd run a marathon in her sleep. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through her neck. Something was wrong. She'd pulled brutal shifts before. She knew what fatigue felt like. But this was different. Deeper, heavier, almost sick. Footsteps echoed faintly down the hallway. A floorboard creaked just outside her door. Ava tensed instinctively, heart kicking against her ribs, but the footsteps moved on, heading downstairs. She took a shaky breath and forced herself out of bed. In the bathroom mirror, her reflection startled her. Her eyes were glassy, almost bruised looking underneath. Her skin flushed in blotchy patches across her collarbone. "Maybe I'm coming down with something," she told herself, trying to push past the unease tightening in her chest. After splashing cold water on her face, she made it downstairs. Henry was in the kitchen, pouring coffee. When he saw her, he paused mid-movement. "You look tired," he said, almost with a hint of satisfaction behind the concern. "Rough night," Ava muttered, heading for the fridge just to avoid his stare. "You slammed your door around midnight," Henry added. "Thought something happened." Ava froze. She hadn't touched her door after going to bed. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't get up." Henry sipped his coffee, smiled. Must have been the house settling then. A chill ran down her spine. She excused herself quickly, telling him she needed to get ready for her shift. But as she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her back the entire time. At work, everything spiraled downhill. By noon, Ava was sweating through her scrubs, shivering despite her fever rising steadily. Her muscles felt like they'd been wrung out. Twice she had to grip the counter just to stay upright. A fellow resident suggested she go home. "I'm fine," Ava lied. "Just low blood sugar." But inside, panic was building. The fatigue, the fever, the chills, the sore joints, the swollen lymph nodes forming in the sides of her neck. It wasn't flu. It wasn't burnout. She'd seen these symptoms together before during rotations. Acute retroviral syndrome, the early stage of HIV. Ava's stomach dropped. No, that wasn't possible. It couldn't be. She and Caleb had both tested negative early in their relationship. They were monogamous. Caleb had never, not once, given her a reason to doubt him. And she hadn't been exposed at work. No needle sticks. No contaminated fluids. Nothing unusual. She went through every scenario in her mind, desperate for a logical explanation. But each answer led her back to the same horrifying conclusion. There was no reason for these symptoms, unless she'd been infected recently, 2 to 6 weeks recently, a timeline that lined up almost perfectly with one thing: the night she moved into the Turner home. Ava forced herself to finish her shift. By the end of the day, she could barely stand. Her throat burned, her chest tightened, and a bone-deep fear consumed her with every step she took toward the parking lot. She didn't even remember driving home. When she walked through the Turner front door, Henry's head lifted from the recliner. He studied her pale face, the way she swayed slightly on her feet. "You look worse than this morning," he said softly. "Need help?" "No, I just need rest." "Sure you don't want me to sit with you?" His tone was friendly, but his eyes were not. Ava felt her pulse spike. "I said I'm fine." She climbed the stairs faster than her body wanted, closing her bedroom door behind her. Then she locked it. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her medical bag. She dug out a rapid HIV test kit that she kept for emergencies, breathing hard as she unwrapped it. Her mind was a whirl of denial and dread. Caleb wouldn't cheat. "I wasn't exposed. This is just a virus. Just stress. Just burnout." But as she pricked her finger and squeezed a drop of blood onto the test pad, the truth she'd been avoiding settled cold in her chest. She wasn't afraid of the disease. Not yet. She was afraid of the timeline. She was afraid of what it meant. 10 minutes later, she stared at the test strip lying flat on her nightstand. A faint line appeared. Then another. 2 lines. Positive. Her breath hitched. Tears pooled in her eyes. She crushed her fist against her mouth to stifle the sob clawing its way up her throat. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, sliding down to the floor as her vision blurred. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Her mind raced. Who infected her? How? When? Then, as if summoned by her dread, a memory flashed. The way Henry stood in his doorway that first night. The way he watched her. The way her bedroom door had been unlocked in the morning, even though she was sure she'd locked it. Ava's skin crawled. A cold wave of terror rolled through her. She didn't want to think it. She didn't want to even imagine it. But the sickness in her body told a story. A timeline she couldn't ignore. A violation she couldn't yet say out loud. And for the first time since moving in, Ava Monroe realized she was living in a house where something terrible was happening. Something she had no memory of. Something her body remembered anyway. Ava Monroe sat on the floor of her locked bedroom, staring at the positive HIV test as if it weren't real. Her breath trembled out of her chest in sharp, shallow bursts. She tried to steady herself, but her mind was running too fast, too wildly, pulling her through timelines and memories she wished she could forget. She didn't know how she got infected, but her body, her symptoms, were telling her the infection wasn't old. It was recent, weeks recent, and the only thing that had changed in her life during that time was moving into the Turner home. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She couldn't accuse Caleb. She didn't want to believe Caleb's father had anything to do with it. She didn't want to believe any of the dark whispers in her mind. But fear has a way of pushing people toward truth long before they're ready. That night, while Caleb was still out of town, Ava made a decision that would alter the course of everything. She would set up a hidden camera in her bedroom, not because she expected anything, but because she needed answers. She needed proof. She needed to know whether what she feared was just paranoia or something far more monstrous. She ordered a pinhole camera online, same-day delivery. Small, silent, nearly invisible. She placed it on the bookshelf across from her bed, angled perfectly to capture the room. She tested it twice, then once more. The footage streamed smoothly to her phone. After setting it up, she sat on her bed for a long time, hugging her knees to her chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every sound, every creak of wood, every soft hum of air through vents feel sinister. She went to bed early, took only half a sleeping pill, and forced herself to leave the bedroom door slightly ajar. If someone came in, if something happened, the camera would see. She would know. At around 1 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled her under, and the camera began recording the truth. The next morning, Ava woke with that same strange heaviness, head pounding, limbs aching. Her room looked undisturbed. Her door was closed, though she hadn't remembered closing it. She forced herself up, shaky, nauseated. Henry wasn't in the hallway. The house was still. She waited until she heard the front door open around 7 a.m. Henry leaving for the shop, before she reached for her phone with trembling hands. Her heart hammered as she opened the camera app. She scrubbed through the footage. Midnight, nothing. 1:30 a.m., nothing. 2:17 a.m., the door stayed still. For a moment, she felt relief. But at 2:42 a.m., the door moved. It didn't swing open dramatically. It cracked open, slowly, carefully, as if someone had practiced slipping inside without making a sound. Ava's fingers froze. A shape appeared in the doorway. Broad shoulders, heavy steps, softened intentionally. That familiar workman's build. Henry Turner. Ava stopped breathing. The air left her chest all at once, replaced by ice. The footage continued. Henry stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. He stood there in the moonlight filtering through the blinds, watching her. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. Minutes passed. Then he approached her bed. Ava felt nausea twist through her stomach as she watched him reach down and gently brush the hair away from her face. The exact way someone might touch a sleeping child. Then he sat on the edge of her mattress. Her heart pounded against her ribs so violently she thought it might split. On the footage, Henry kept one eye on her face, monitoring her unconscious state as if checking whether she would wake. Then slowly pulled back her blanket. Ava's hands flew to her mouth. Her whole body convulsed as she watched him lift her pajama top. His hands, his mouth, the disturbingly methodical way he moved. As if he'd done this many times before. As if he knew exactly how sedated she'd be. A low, broken sound escaped her throat. Her vision blurred. She didn't want to see more. But she kept watching. She had to. The footage showed Henry standing up, removing his belt. The camera captured everything. Every violation, every movement, every calculated, predatory action. Ava felt her soul leave her body. Her stomach lurched. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. When she returned, shaking uncontrollably, she forced herself to skip ahead. Footage showed Henry leaving the room at 3:28 a.m., wiping his hands on her bedsheet before slipping out as quietly as he had entered. Her bedsheet, the one she had woken up on, the one she had thought was only damp from night sweats. Her hands began trembling violently. Her breath came out in short, sharp gasps. Her body remembered what she had not been conscious to feel. Her infection, her symptoms, her timeline. It all made sense now. Henry Turner had drugged her without her knowledge. He had entered her room multiple times. He had violated her for weeks. And he had infected her with HIV. Ava collapsed onto the floor, the phone slipping from her hands. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Just shaking, ragged breaths, and the overwhelming terror that the monster she feared wasn't in her imagination. He had been standing beside her bed every night. She couldn't call Caleb. Not yet. She couldn't confront Henry. She couldn't run to the police without exposing the footage. But she could do one thing. She could copy the video. She could save it. She could protect herself. She uploaded the footage to the cloud, saved it on a USB, saved another copy on an external drive she hid in her bag. Only then did she sit on the edge of her bed, empty, shaking, and broken. Her life was no longer her own. Her home was not safe. Her sleep was not safe. And somewhere in the house, Henry Turner was moving about his morning routine as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed her life while she slept. Ava Monroe wiped her tears, because now she finally knew the truth, and she knew exactly who had given her the virus slowly taking over her body. Ava Monroe sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour before she gathered enough strength to stand. Her legs still trembled, her throat burned from crying, and every breath felt sharp, like inhaling broken glass. But she knew she couldn't keep this to herself. Not anymore. Not after seeing the footage. Not after realizing what had been happening to her body. She waited until Caleb's flight landed. She saw the notification on her phone. 30 minutes later, the front door opened downstairs. His familiar voice filled the hallway. "Ava, I'm home." Her heart clenched. She had no words rehearsed. No plan. Just the truth she could no longer carry. Caleb appeared in her doorway, suitcase still in hand. His face softened instantly when he saw her. "Baby, what's wrong?" Ava didn't answer. She just held up her phone. "You need to see something." Caleb set the suitcase down slowly, sensing the gravity in her voice. When he sat beside her, She opened the video, the same footage that had shattered her world hours earlier. She hit play. Caleb watched in silence. For the first 10 seconds, confusion flickered in his eyes. At 15 seconds, confusion turned to disbelief. At 20 seconds, to horror. When Henry appeared in the doorway on the video, Caleb's breath caught in his throat. When Henry approached the bed, Caleb's jaw tightened. When the violation began, Caleb's entire body went rigid. Ava couldn't watch. She kept her eyes on Caleb, and what she saw scared her almost as much as the footage had. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't panicking. He was becoming very, very still. By the time the footage ended, Caleb's face had transformed. Every trace of warmth drained from him, replaced by something darker, something cold and empty. He stood up without speaking. "Caleb," Ava whispered, voice cracking. "Say something." His jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched near his temple. Did this happen more than once? Ava swallowed. I think so. The symptoms, the timing, the way I woke up feeling. Caleb, he gave me HIV. Caleb staggered back like he'd been punched in the chest. "My father?" Ava nodded, tears blurring her vision. Caleb ran both hands through his hair, pacing the length of the room. His breath came fast, ragged, torn between grief and rage. "What he did to you?" He dug his fingers into his scalp. "What he did in my house." He pressed a fist to his mouth, as if trying to contain something boiling inside him. "What he did while I wasn't here." Ava reached for him, desperate to anchor him. "Caleb, please." But when he looked at her again, there was something new in his eyes. Something she had never seen before. Resolve. Cold. Final. He grabbed his keys. "Ava, stay here." She stood up abruptly. "Caleb, don't." But he was already halfway down the stairs. He didn't shout. He didn't slam the door. He moved with purposeful calm. The kind of calm a storm has seconds before it touches ground. Ava ran after him, voice cracking. "Caleb, wait. Please. We need to think." He paused only long enough to say, "I'm going to talk to him." The way he said talk sent terror slicing through her. "Caleb, no. You can't go alone. You don't know what he'll do." Caleb turned to her, eyes burning. "You saw what he did." Then he stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. Ava didn't even remember grabbing her shoes. She sprinted to her car, fumbling with the keys, breath shaking as she pulled onto the road. Her mind raced with images. Caleb confronting Henry, Henry lying, Henry turning violent. She couldn't let Caleb face him alone. Not after everything. The auto shop was only 10 minutes away, but tonight it felt like she was driving through mud. Every red light felt like a betrayal, every slow driver like a threat. She kept dialing Caleb's phone. It rang, then went silent. When she finally turned onto the gravel driveway of Turner and Son Auto Repair, her headlights swept across the open garage bay, and her heart stopped. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The garage lights flickered weakly overhead. Tools lay scattered on the ground as if dropped mid-motion. And in the center of the floor, half under the lifted sedan, was a pair of heavy work boots, motionless. Ava slammed her car door open and ran into the bay. "Caleb, Caleb, where are?" Then she saw the body. Not Caleb. Henry Turner lay beneath the car, crushed under the engine block, his torso pinned in a way that left no doubt. This was fatal. The jack that held the car up had tipped sideways, bent unnaturally, as if deliberately kicked. Ava stumbled back. A hand clapped over her mouth. "Oh God, oh God." A shadow shifted behind her. She spun around and saw Caleb standing there in the dim corner of the bay, hands at his sides, breathing steady, eyes cold. His voice was calm, almost eerily so. "It's done." Ava's whole body trembled. "Caleb, what did you do?" He stepped closer, but not too close. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't crying. He wasn't remorseful. "He slipped," Caleb said quietly. "We got here and found him like this." Ava stared at him in horror. "Caleb, that's not." He cut her off, his tone turning firm, decisive. "This is what happened. Understand." Ava felt tears spill down her cheeks. She knew what this meant. Caleb had made his choice, and now she had one too. Expose the truth and lose him forever. or bury the truth with the man who had destroyed her life. She felt her knees weaken. Her voice came out barely audible. "Caleb, what have we done?" Caleb reached out, gently brushing a tear from her jaw. "Well, we had to." Sirens were still miles away. They had minutes to decide the story they would tell. And deep down, Ava knew, tonight, the woman she used to be had died under that car, right next to Henry Turner. Detective Nora Bennett stepped out of her unmarked black Ford, the flashing red-blue glow of patrol cars reflecting off the hood. Summer nights in the outskirts of town were usually quiet, too quiet. That's why the hum of police radios and the sharp crackle of crime scene tape slicing through the air made her instincts spike immediately. Turner and Son Auto Repair sat in the middle of an industrial strip, dusty, unassuming, always closed by 9 p.m. Tonight, its garage door hung half open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. Detective Bennett, a young officer, jogged toward her. Possible work accident. Victim is Henry Turner, 52. Found under a sedan. Jack failure. Nora's eyes narrowed. A seasoned mechanic crushed by his own jack? Doesn't sound right. She ducked under the crime scene tape and stepped inside the garage. The smell hit her first, burnt oil, metal, and a metallic tang of blood. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead, giving everything a sickly, haunted glow. In the center of the concrete floor lay a body covered by a sheet. The blood pool around it told her the death was instant, violent, catastrophic. Nearby, the collapsed hydraulic jack was bent in a direction that made no mechanical sense. Too neat, too clean, too arranged. Nora crouched beside the jack, studying the angle, the skid marks, the blood spatter. This wasn't adding up. Behind her, a soft, trembling voice broke the silence. I'm Ava. Ava Foster." Nora turned. A young woman stood there, arms wrapped around herself, face pale, tears drying on her cheeks. Next to her was Caleb Turner, Henry's son, tall, composed, eerily calm. "We came in and saw him like that," Caleb said. His voice was steady, too steady. Nora studied him. Ava looked genuinely shaken. Her hands kept trembling, and she couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Caleb, on the other hand, was stone still, controlled, detached, the kind of calm that always made Nora suspicious. "Miss Foster," Nora said gently. "We didn't attempt CPR? Check his pulse." Ava shook her head immediately. "I'm a doctor." One look, and I knew it was over. His chest was crushed. There was no chance. A precise medical answer. But Ava's fear? That came from somewhere else. Nora shifted her attention to Caleb. "You said you arrived after Miss Foster?" "Yes." Too fast. Ava froze just for half a second. Nora noticed. She always noticed. Inside the garage, forensic techs began lifting the body. The senior examiner, a gray-haired man named Dr. Levin, approached Nora. "Looks like a jack failure," he said. "But the body position is odd. If you were working normally, impact should be across the chest. But most of the trauma is to the head." "Meaning he was under the car the way we'd expect," Nora murmured. Levin nodded. Nora's instincts flared hotter. Outside, she found Caleb and Ava seated on the back step of an ambulance. Ava looked shaken to her core. Caleb sat rigid beside her, too controlled, too composed for a man who had just lost his father. "I have a few more questions," Nora said. Caleb nodded stiffly. "Why were you here tonight?" Ava answered first, voice fragile. "We were going to talk wedding plans." Caleb echoed, "Yes." "And you arrived separately?" Nora asked. "Caleb, I just got back from a business trip. I came straight here. Yet you immediately knew your father was dead?" she pressed. Caleb hesitated, the slightest flicker in his eyes. "I could tell." Nora didn't blink. "Most people would still check for a pulse. You didn't." Caleb's jaw tightened. Ava's breathing hitched. Nora logged every reaction. When the scene wrapped up, Nora took one more long sweep of the garage. The hoist was in use. A veteran mechanic would never choose a jack over a hoist unless forced. No struggle marks. No drag marks. No last-second scramble. Odd. The jack was bent sideways. Not broken downward. Sideways. Like it had been kicked or forced. Her gut whispered. This wasn't an accident. Not even close. 20 minutes later, She arrived at the Turner house for follow-up questioning. Caleb answered the door, freshly showered, hair still damp. Ava stood behind him on the stairs, eyes cloudy with fear. "Detective," Caleb said stiffly. "What now?" "I need to see Henry's room," Nora replied. He froze for half a breath. Nora noticed. Inside the room, everything was neat, too neat. But the small things betrayed panic. A file drawer slightly open. Papers stacked wrong. A dust ring where something had recently been removed. Nora touched the drawer. The wood was still warm. Someone had been searching. Not long ago. She turned to find Caleb standing silently in the doorway. Ava behind him, hands twisting nervously. And then Nora asked the question that sliced the room open. "Is there something you two haven't told me?" Ava flinched. Caleb swallowed hard. Then he responded with a line that made Nora's stomach turn cold. "Detective, sometimes the truth hurts more than the death itself." Nora stared at him, knowing instantly. Henry Turner's death was not an accident, and this couple was hiding something enormous. Detective Nora Bennett returned to her car with a stiff heaviness in her chest, the kind that only came when a case wasn't just a case anymore. It was a knot tightening around something bigger, darker. Something people were fighting desperately to hide. She sat behind the wheel, replaying everything she'd seen inside the Turner house. Ava's trembling hands. Caleb's deadpan calm. The warm drawer in Henry's room. The missing file. The tension thick enough to touch. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And Nora wasn't walking away. The next morning, she arrived at the precinct early, armed with fresh coffee and a growing obsession. She pulled Henry Turner's medical records from the evidence locker, the one she'd found tucked inside his workstation, and sifted through them again. Lab results, blood panels, a diagnosis that made her freeze. HIV positive. Not recent. Long-standing. Nora leaned back in her chair, heart hammering. If Henry had been sick for years, why hadn't anyone mentioned it? Why hadn't Caleb? Why hadn't Ava? Her gut twisted. There was more. She just had to dig deeper. By afternoon, she drove back to the Turner house under the pretense of clarifying a few funeral documents. The home was quiet, thick with that unsettling calm people force upon themselves after a tragedy. Ava opened the door, her smile stretched too tight. "Detective Bennett, is something wrong?" "I just need to go over a few things," Nora said. "Won't take long." Caleb appeared at the top of the stairs, watching like a silent shadow. Nora stepped inside and made her way toward the living room. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, still on, as if someone forgot to close it in a hurry. A small flash drive was plugged into the side. Caleb stiffened instantly. Ava turned pale, and Nora saw it, clear as day. "Fear. Mind if I take a look at this?" Nora asked casually. "It's just wedding stuff," Caleb said too quickly. Ava's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Nora didn't respond. Instead, she sat down slowly, clicked the folder titled Miscellaneous, and immediately sensed the temperature in the room drop. Ava stepped closer as if about to speak, but no words came. Inside the folder were video files, dated, labeled, and the titles made Nora's heart stop. Bedroom cam _01. Bedroom cam _02. Bedroom cam _03. Her finger hovered above the mouse. She didn't open anything. She didn't have to. She looked up. Ava's eyes were swimming with tears. Caleb's jaw tightened. In that moment, Nora understood everything. She didn't know the exact details. Not yet, but she knew the shape of the truth. Henry had violated Ava. Repeatedly. While she slept. While Caleb was away. And Caleb knew. And the accident in the garage wasn't an accident at all. Ava broke first. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know how to stop it. Caleb reached for her hand, but it wasn't comfort. It was desperation. Nora closed the laptop gently. "You don't have to tell me the details," she said softly. "Not unless you want to." Ava shook her head, tears spilling over. We can't survive if this gets out." Caleb's voice came out low, controlled. "My father, he did things. Horrible things. And when Ava found out he stopped breathing hard. We were trying to figure out what to do. But then he ended up under the car." Nora stared at him. "Ended up," she repeated. Caleb held her gaze, unblinking. "That's the story," he said quietly. He ended up under the car. Silence filled the room like a suffocating fog. Ava whispered, "Detective, please, if this becomes public, the media will destroy me. They'll blame me. They'll blame both of us. I've already lost enough." Nora's eyes softened. "Ava, did Henry ever hurt you when you were awake?" Ava shook her head violently. I don't remember anything. But the footage," she closed her eyes, shuddering. "I saw everything," Caleb added, voice trembling with rage. "She tested positive 2 days later." Nora froze. Ava looked up at her, shattered. "I don't know how long he was doing it. I don't know when I got infected. I don't know anything anymore." It hit Nora like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just assault. This was a violation beyond anything she had ever handled. This was an infection, a death sentence years ago, a lifelong burden even now. Caleb whispered. "I confronted him. I just wanted him to confess. But when I got to the shop, the jack had already slipped." Nora heard the lie under the truth. But she also heard something else. Love. Broken, desperate, consuming love. Ava sobbed harder. "Please, detective, please don't take him away. He's the only person I have left." Caleb squeezed her hand. "We're not bad people. We were just hurt." Nora finished for him. "You were hurt." And then the weight of the decision landed on her shoulders. Follow the law and destroy their lives? Or protect a victim who had already lost too much, and a man who acted out of love, rage, and horror? Nora exhaled slowly. She unplugged the flash drive, closed the laptop, and handed it to Caleb. Their eyes widened in disbelief. "There's no mention of a video in my case notes," Nora said. "And there won't be." Ava covered her mouth, sobbing. Caleb's eyes glistened with relief and guilt. Nora stood. "You two live your lives quietly. Move forward. Get help. Heal. But if either of you ever lie to me again," her voice dropped to a razor's edge, "I will revisit every detail of this case." They nodded vigorously. Nora headed toward the door. But before stepping out, she turned back. "And Caleb," she added softly, "whatever happened in that garage, you make peace with it. Understand?" Caleb swallowed hard. "I will." Ava whispered, "Thank you." Nora didn't smile, but her voice softened. "Take care of each other." Then she stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the unspoken truth heavy on her shoulders. Some cases ended with handcuffs, others with paperwork. But this one ended with a choice. And Nora Bennett had chosen mercy over justice, because sometimes in the darkest family crimes, mercy was the only thing that could save what was left. 1 year later, spring sunlight drifted over the quiet suburban park where children laughed, dogs barked, and the world spun on as if nothing dark had ever happened. Detective Nora Bennett sat on a wooden bench, sipping burned station coffee, letting the breeze tug at the loose strands of hair around her face. She wasn't here for work. She was here because the past had a way of circling back. Across the lawn, she spotted them. Ava Foster, now Ava Turner, pushing a stroller with a soft, unhurried rhythm. Her hair was longer, her face fuller, healthier. She wore sunglasses, not to hide bruises or tears, but simply because the sunlight was bright and warm. Beside her walked Caleb. His posture was different from the man she first met. Less rigid, less haunted, but the shadows still lingered in the corners of his eyes. Trauma doesn't vanish. It just folds itself into the little spaces between breaths. A tiny baby boy slept in the stroller, not biologically Caleb's. Ava's medication and diagnosis made conception risky, but they had started the adoption process months earlier. The child was fresh evidence of their stubborn desire to build something good out of the ruins. Nora watched them quietly, unnoticed. She didn't need to speak to know the truth. They had survived the impossible. But survival always comes with a cost. Ava and Caleb settled under a blooming dogwood tree. Ava lifted the baby gently, cradling him against her chest. Caleb brushed a leaf from the stroller canopy and leaned down to kiss her forehead. Domestic, peaceful, almost too perfect. Nora exhaled softly through her nose. Trauma survivors often create these little pockets of serenity, tiny worlds protected by silence and unspoken agreements. And the Turner's silence was monumental. The secret they shared had sharp edges, dangerous enough to slice open their lives if it ever slipped into daylight. The murder, the tape, the infection, the garage, the lie. It sat between them at every dinner table, every argument, every quiet night when Ava woke up gasping from nightmares she never fully described. Sometimes mercy was a softer kind of violence, and Nora had chosen it. A small voice snapped her from her thoughts. Detective Bennett. Caleb stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile tugging at his lips. Nora nodded. Caleb. Ava approached with the baby resting peacefully on her shoulder. We didn't expect to see you here. I take my walks here. Helps me think, Nora said. Caleb chuckled softly. Detective who never stops thinking. I could have guessed. They stood together for a moment, the air thick with things none of them dared say openly. Ava shifted the baby slightly, pressing her cheek to his soft hair. He's beautiful, Nora said. Ava's smile trembled. He saved us. In a way. Nora nodded. Sometimes hope comes in small packages. Caleb exhaled, long and slow. Nora, I owe you everything. I mean that. She met his eyes. Guilt flickered inside them, flickering like a flame that refused to die. You don't owe me, she said quietly. You owe her. And yourself. Stay honest. Stay clean. Stay focused on your life now. He nodded, but didn't look fully convinced. Ava stepped forward. I'm doing better. The therapy helps. The meds help. But some nights, she trailed off, eyes glistening. Some nights I see him in the doorway. I see the camera light blinking. I hear things I never actually heard. Nora felt her heart squeeze painfully. Trauma isn't erased by justice or the lack of it. I'm sorry, Nora whispered. Ava shook her head. You gave us a chance to heal. That's more than anyone else would have done. Nora didn't respond. If she did, her voice might crack. Caleb cleared his throat. There's something we want you to know. Nora braced herself. We're leaving town, he said. Next month. New start. New jobs. Just distance. Ava nodded. We can't live with the garage in the rearview mirror every day. Nora breathed out slowly. Fresh starts can be good. But, Caleb said, the secret, it's coming with us. Nora's jaw tightened. Secrets always do. He paused. Do you ever regret it? What you did for us? Nora stared at him for a long moment before answering. I think about it, she said softly. Almost every day. That garage isn't just your ghost. It's mine too. Ava set a gentle hand on Nora's arm. You saved me from second death. Nora swallowed hard. I protected you from a justice system that wasn't built for people in your situation. I didn't save you. I gave you time. What you do with it, that's on you. Caleb nodded, understanding what she wasn't fully saying. Nora looked at the baby again. He gurgled in his sleep, tiny fists curled, completely unaware of the violence that had shaped the world he was born into. Maybe that innocence made it worth it. Maybe not. Only time would tell. As the sun dipped lower, the Turners packed up their things. Ava buckled the baby into the stroller. Caleb adjusted the diaper bag over his shoulder. Before leaving, Ava stepped close to Nora. Do you think secrets fade? She asked quietly. Nora shook her head. No, they don't fade, she said. But you learn how to live around them. You shape your life so the shadow falls behind you, not on you. Ava closed her eyes as if absorbing every word. Caleb extended his hand. Nora shook it. Goodbye, detective, he said. Nora corrected him gently. It's just Nora. They walked away, stroller wheels clicking along the path, sunlight scattering through the trees around them. They looked like any young family chasing a new beginning. But Nora knew better than anyone. No beginning is truly clean when it's built on a buried truth. And some secrets, especially the ones soaked in blood and grief, never stop breathing. They just sleep lightly. She sat back on the bench and watched them disappear into the distance. A year had passed. Time had softened the edges, but not erased them. And in that silence, Nora understood her role in their story. She wasn't the hero. She wasn't the villain. She was the witness, the keeper of a secret that would follow her for the rest of her life. As the breeze picked up again, she whispered to herself, some cases end, some cases close, and some cases stay alive. The Turner case would stay alive. Not in the court record, not in headlines, but deep inside, three people who could never outrun it. And Nora Bennett. Against every instinct,